All right, we got more seats in the front, so I see quite a few people standing back there. Come right up. All right, well, as you saw, things are going to happen in Europe, not just in Silicon Valley. Now we're going to talk about something a little different. We're going to talk about part of industry, part of the ecosystem that is really getting disrupted. If you can imagine, AI is about prediction. It's about trying to predict what you're going to buy. That's what Amazon does. Trying to predict what you want to watch. That's what Netflix does. Well, in mobility, people want to predict where you're going. And the next panel is run by Federico Flores, who's the COO, Chief Information Officer at Ferrovial. He's been with us for a long time. He's a good friend of the South Summit. And he's got an amazing panel of guests that are going to discuss the role of mobility today and how it is being disrupted. We've got Rika Cristanto, who's COO of OnTruck. We have Alistair McLeod, who is CEO of Teralytics. And we have Nir Erez, who's CEO of Movit. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Federico, Rika, Alistair, and Nir.
Okay, thank you. Well, first, congrats to South Summit. Great event and amazing people here. And thank you to all of you to share this interesting panel about mobility. Mobility is changing today. I mean, big companies are investing huge amount of money in mobility. The autonomous car is coming to the cities right now. And 66% of the population will live in cities in 2050. So everything will change, and we'll have to offer different services to these citizens with limited budget. In Ferrovial, in fact, is a kind of a mobility company. We have airports, highways, services. We have 20,000 cars in the streets. We are working in 1,000 cities. And there are around 700 million people through our infrastructures. So we're worried about this changing in mobility, and we try to offer a better service and a safe service to the citizens. In such a way, we launched City. City is a car sharing. You can use that in Madrid. And this car, which is an electrical car, is managed every day by an artificial intelligence system, so by software, all the cars and all the operators. And we are launching also Wondo. You can use also Wondo here. Wondo is a mobility as a service platform. And in that platform, you will be able to use car, taxi, bus, every kind of transport, including bikes and so on, and public transportation in the future. So we're trying to offer different service, and this is the reason we're here, just to speak about mobility of the future. This is an amazing panel, and just for you to describe your company in a nutshell, in 2 minutes. Could you describe your company, please, Neil? You start.
Thank you, Federico. I'm very happy to be here. Movit is the world's largest public transit app in the world today. We operate in 2,500 cities. I'm sure a lot of you here came to this event maybe today using Movit. But it's not only in Madrid, it's 2,500 cities around the world in 83 countries. We do have about 250 million users right now around the world. We're adding about 1.1 million new users every day. But most importantly, we collect about 4 billion data points every day from our users. And by that, we have a clear visibility of the urban mobility everywhere around the world. So that's in a nutshell what Movit is doing.
Rika, please.
Sure. OnTruck, we are a B2B platform. We connect companies that are looking to move road freight with truck drivers that are looking to make a living. And I don't know if any of you guys know much about trucking, but it is a massive market, 500 billion just in Europe, and it's highly inefficient and highly traditional. So 1 out of every 4 trucks driving around the highways today is completely empty. So at OnTruck, we're trying to find a much more intelligent way to move goods. So for companies, they can find, book, and track a shipment in a far more efficient way. And we empower truck drivers as well to make a much better living.
And Steve, please go ahead with Teralytics.
Sure, so Teralytics, we specialize in generating insights into human mobility. So for us, having the chance to speak on a panel that's about applying data to human mobility is absolutely what we love to talk about, and the company's a little geekish about it, if I'm honest. So our insights are used by different kind of groups of customers, but essentially all trying to achieve the same thing. Governments and public sector bodies would use it to improve regulation, which is a big challenge, or to procure services better. Traditional transport operators would use it to do better strategic planning, to understand better how their systems are being used, and increasingly to innovate, because these guys have got to start reinventing themselves. And then smart mobility, new entrants, we work with them to help them plan a market entry, like where should they go, who should they target, and then once they're live, we help them understand how well they're doing in terms of competing and kind of taking share from the incumbents. So we love to talk about this topic. It's our core business.
Thank you. So let's start with the discussion. I wonder about data, okay? How important is data and data-driven decision regarding mobility?
So maybe I'll start with an example. Data is not something new. You know, every city is, in the last 100 years, used to do surveys, sending people to the street to collect data about mobility. So just to give you an example, the city of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil do a survey every 3 years to collect data about people's movement. They survey between 50 to 100,000 people every 3 years. Just to give you a perspective how data changed today, Moveit survey passively the same amount of people, 50,000 to 100,000 people, 3 times a day, while they were doing it every 3 years. So imagine that there's now 1,000 times more data to the city of Rio de Janeiro to make a decision about how public transit should be in Brazil. So it just opened their eyes much more extensive.
Yeah, and on track, data really is everything. So most folks think that what we do, we're an app. You know, you can open up the app, you want to move your goods, you order your shipment, you are able to track it end to end. But the only way to make that a really seamless experience is because we have data running in the background. We collect it, we clean it, we analyze it, and actually, most importantly, we're able to visualize it to make it actionable. And one of the key examples of that is how we use data to actually guarantee the best and upfront pricing. So pricing in trucking is very complex, far more complex than ride sharing, because there's dozens of vehicle types, contract and spot rates, limited hours of service. But this actually makes it really awesome because technology can add a lot more value. So, for example, why we can actually get the best prices to our clients. If I have, let's say, a shipment order in Alcalá, I know the location of all my trucks at any given time, and I can find the closest and best truck for that shipment and make sure that because the driver has to drive fewer miles than any other truck around, I can translate that to lower prices for my client. And even taking us next step, then maybe another shipment order goes out in like Guadalajara. I'm sorry, my geography of Madrid is not very good, but then I can actually have 2 pickups with that same truck driver. And that increase in utilization of a single driver can, again, translate to lower costs for the clients. So we use a lot of algorithms, trained models to actually be able to predict supply and demand very well.
Lister.
You've got great answers, but I mean, the reason we're so interested in population scale mobility is it tends to be the case that the people that have the greatest need for mobility to be provided for them are the people that probably have least ability to access private transportation or private mobility. Like there's a sort of a wealth mismatch. And one of the things that makes what we do particularly interesting, I think, for example, for city governments and so on, is that we see the whole population all the time. So I'm not trading stats, but I mean, we're in less markets than Moveit, but we pick 40 billion data points a day from what we see, and we see everybody we see them between 150, 600 times a day. So critically, what that brings into our picture is when you leave your home, Yeah, what happens next? When you hit the transit system, what happens next? So we see end to end. In the end, your quality of life is driven by your end-to-end trip, not by the bit in the middle. And we think it's super important that the planners are using this inclusive data when they think about how to get mobility to work, so that the whole of the population is taken into account when you make big decisions. So our data is used everything from, let's say, traditional stuff like, how would New York replan the next generation of infrastructure before they write a $100 billion check, on the one hand. At the other end, we just closed our most interesting, I think, new smart mobility deal, which is with a company that's going to launch flying taxi services in 5 years. But already they got to think now about who are they targeting, where will they target, which routes do they go first. And our data kind of gives that holistic view of everybody, all mode of transport, all of the time.
If I may add one more thing about data. Data is also coming from a different perspective. When Move started 6 years ago, I don't know if you're aware of it, but only 20% of the cities around the world had transit data aggregated. Till today, cities like Istanbul, Buenos Aires, Jakarta, doesn't have official organized transit data. This is what data means, and Move were able to create a group of volunteers. It was more than 2 million people volunteered, and 400,000 people are editors building the data for transit around the world. So this is how important data is for daily commuters all over the world.
Okay, let's go to another topic, the autonomous car. The autonomous car is coming to the cities. I don't know when, but maybe in the 20s. In several years we'll be here. In our opinion, the traffic will be higher, at least during the transition between classical cars and autonomous cars. But anyway, the mobility will change in the cities. How does it affect your business and the mobility in the cities? What's your opinion about that?
You want to start?
Sure. I mean, for us, every change is interesting and just brings sort of new opportunity, new challenge. I can give you a non-specific, obviously, but live example of a discussion we're having right now. So there is a particular city we're working with somewhere in the world where the question that the city is asking is, like, there is an interest to plan now for autonomous. But what they don't want is the autonomous version of what we currently have in New York, right? Like Ubers endlessly circling the block with no people in them. Which has then led to this regulatory crackdown, like, okay, we can't have this, so boom, 10,000 licenses and we're done. So what they've said we want is, like, they're going to, on the one hand, be super open to autonomous. They want to be one of the leaders in autonomous vehicles. On the other hand, the rules are, when the cars are empty, they've got to not be circling the block. They've got to get out of the city center. So then why is that interesting for us? Well, okay, the key operational challenge there is going to be, where do you put the cars when they're not traveling people around the city, in order that when they're needed, they are as close as possible to mobility demand, which takes you then into the whole predictive, like, where are people going to want to travel from next, rather than where are they standing now. So for us, it's all opportunity, and it's all very interesting.
Yeah, because
I mean, again, it's really highly relevant for our business, self-driving trucks. I don't know so much about personal mobility, but certainly in terms of consumer transport. So it's going to be a reality. 5-10 years is really going to be a driving force, and I would say it's highly complementary to OnTruck today. So I think at OnTruck, we envision kind of like a future in which self-driving trucks and truck drivers kind of work together in a single ecosystem, because self-driving trucks are very much designed for highways. So they're for long haul, taking a shipment from, let's say, Barcelona to Madrid. But then once the shipment is in Madrid, how do you get it to the final destination? And that's where truck drivers still are very relevant, because they have critical skills that it would be very difficult for self-driving trucks to actually match. Like, for example, navigating the tight streets of Madrid, or being able to, like, back up into a very complex loading dock. And so for us, at least, every single self-driving truck will need a partner for a local route. And so growth in self-driving trucks means more road freight that is efficiently moved, which means growth for truck drivers, and obviously growth for OnTruck.
I want to take a different approach about that. So you all understand that if, autonomous vehicles, and by the way, it will become the standard. I can tell you that without disclosing any city or any data, that we're going to participate in a pilot of a real autonomous vehicle already next year. Mm-hmm. But the question is, if autonomous vehicles will keep moving 1.1 average person in one car, that's going to block the roads very, very quickly. So I think the impact of autonomous vehicles in the coming years will be related to the fact that how can we make the average number of people within an autonomous car more close to 2 people rather than 1 person.
Right.
And this is how it's going to affect our business. Movie today see the demand and the intent of about 250 million people. In about 3 years, we're going to cross the 1 billion people milestone. That will give us a great view of people's intent. And if we could, hopefully, help people to join together and every 2 people take 1 autonomous vehicle, that will be very, very important, and that's the holy grail of the future of urban mobility.
So everything is changing. We're hearing about flying cars, drones, autonomous vehicle. Maybe are we in a new paradigm of mobility now, or what do you think about that?
So we're definitely on the verge of a new paradigm, and I think the new paradigm is not necessarily just going to be related to technology like autonomous vehicle. The way we see it at Move It is the main paradigm shift will be related to the fact that cities or transit authorities will have to be more active about transportation than it is today. Today, cities owns the infrastructure, they set the rules, and they just monitor the rules. But in the future, cities will have to actually control every moving part. The vehicles, the autonomous vehicles will be controlled like air traffic control is going to be street traffic control. So every moving part will have to be controlled. And I think the paradigm shift will mainly going to be affecting cities and transit authorities rather than just pure technology.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
So we're definitely seeing a paradigm shift, and what we visibly see day to day, like, kind of like those scooters all over Madrid right now, just changing the way people are moving around. But because consumers are expecting on-demand, today, next day deliveries, it actually means that the movement of goods has to change as well. And I think that specifically around trucking, which is actually 70% of the way goods are moved around the world, that is going to change dramatically. And on one side, it's because of technology, like the self-driving vehicles, but also much cleaner trucks, electrics, hybrids, and also a much more connected supply chain. You have your producers, distributors, retailers, transport companies all now talking to each other with data, which is, I think, the purpose of this panel. And then on the second piece, though, that enables this kind of new paradigm shift is new business models. I mean, we see this in terms of asset ownership, ride sharing, but also, I don't want to talk about on-truck too much, but it is really being able to create a marketplace that consolidates a very fragmented supply base of thousands of truck drivers and allow companies to access them now in a very transparent way, consistent quality of service, and kind of fair upfront pricing. That, again, is like business models that cities will need to accommodate for going forwards.
Okay, understood.
I think we're already past the inflection point, honestly. I'm the second oldest guy in our company by miles, right? And the average age in Teralytics is 30. So I'm a little older than that. And when we reach the point where I take a Lime bike or a Lime scooter to get my Starbucks, we're definitely in a new paradigm. I used to walk. So I think we're already there, but we're kind of at that sort of painful point where the transition has started, but the world can't keep up. So we're already seeing like the models that are going to be the models of the future, some winners and some losers. We're already seeing them now, right? So we're working with a national railway operator that's already looking at innovating at the edge of their network so that they can start to support the end-to-end trip, and we're seeing that now. We're working with providers of sort of flexible mobility because we're all getting more demanding. So the whole stand at the bus stop and wait for the bus to turn up, it doesn't work for us anymore. No. So more and more, of course, we have Uber and Lyft and all of those guys, but now we're getting smart shuttles. The whole mobility on demand thing is exploding, and kind of Lime Bike and Bird, it's a whole new model of getting around which just works for people. So I think we're there already, and the reason we're so we've become so geekish about it at Teralytics is there's almost like every week there's another mode of transport, another way of getting around, somebody else breaking the mold with a new model or a new business model. And my sort of personal view is I think it'll go all the way to actually being able to change the behavior of travelers rather than we're always talking about supply of mobility, right? Here's a bike, here's a car, here's a thing. But what gets talked about very little is can we change the way that people consume mobility, which is probably where the greatest, on a macro scale, where the greatest efficiency is to be had. If you could take the 2 daily peaks of a city transportation and squash them down and spread them by 5%, you probably banked $100 billion, right? So I think it's a very interesting time.
Yeah. So you are amazing startups. I work for a corporation. We as corporates are experts in killing external ideas. We have all the barriers not to work with you, with startups. What you can demand to a corporate to work with, I mean, as a startup?
Well, we're starting a
and
relationship.
be honest, okay?
Yeah, no, of course. But I mean, so we're starting a relationship with you guys early days. But so I can speak firsthand, and don't worry, I won't say anything bad, right? But I mean, our experience of working with Ferrovial so far has been very positive, right? Genuinely. But I think what you've got in place that not all corporates have is you've got a handful of people whose job is to make sure that it's easy for us to talk to you.
I am speaking, generally speaking, not with Ferrovial as a corporate and a startup, these two worlds which are completely different. How can we, I mean...
I think you need to find a way to go faster. That would be my only thing. Like once we have the first conversation, to get from the first conversation to the interesting bit, corporates need to find a way to move quicker.
I mean, many of our clients and partners today are actually, let's say, would traditionally be competitors of ours. I mean, we basically are both intermediaries within the trucking space. But I think one of the things that at least, let's say, more traditional intermediaries are recognizing is that we do have a specific way of working. For example, around product management, around building kind of machine learning algorithms that they don't have that expertise in-house. So actually, we partner with them very closely and critically around actually providing data, so that access and ownership of the data, which we are able to consolidate together, and we share with them in a very structured and visual way, so they can use it. So for example, we're working with some of our partners like Decathlon, because they have very just-in-time requirements. And so we actually tell them on a daily basis which are our trouble spots for pickups and drop-offs, which are the loading zones that you always are going to have inefficiencies. And being able to track that, they themselves can actually improve their own operations and supply chain.
Any idea, Nir?
Yeah, so again, we're not going to talk about the direct work we have with Ferrovial. I want to talk about general, interaction with large organizations, corporations, or even, municipalities.
Yeah.
The interaction points are also the friction points between the startup world and the more traditional large organizations are clearly defined by definition of time windows or time to market. Startups works about 10 to 100 times faster than a large organization from a decision-making process. And I think if I need to give one advice to large organizations that want to work with startups and want to keep up with the innovation of startups and become an innovator and not die as a dinosaur, is that you should put together a team that is dedicated to work with startups, and this team must adapt the startup timeframes in order to be able to react quickly enough to take the decisions together with the startups in a relatively equal pace. Otherwise, there's a huge gap between how decisions are made within the large organization and the startups. And from my experience, in many cases, we just said, forget it, we're moving on. I mean, we're not waiting for you guys. And whenever we meet an organization that puts together a team that can run with us in the same pace, then it's a great situation for a great success and great relationship. So that's my 2 cents about that.
Okay, and concerning data, because you all manage huge amount of data in all your companies, are you worried about the confidentiality, the ownership of the data, because of the customers behind it?
So I can speak on behalf of Moveit. We, of course, GDPR compliant, and we have to go through this process. But let me tell you something more clear about that. In Move It, we are, by definition, do not collect personal data. We aggregate only general type of information from certain reasons. Of course, personal privacy is very important, but let me tell you from different directions. We've been approached by many secret services around the world trying to track people. I don't want to be in a situation where I need to either refuse or provide personal data. So the easiest way is not to collect it in a personal way, just to aggregate it to a service. We don't keep it as personal.
Thank you, Neil.
No, definitely access and ownership of the data is really critical. And self-driving trucks and connected vehicles actually have one of the most critical ways that cities today can learn about what's going on in their streets: congestion, noise, air pollution. And the thing is, so what do we do with that data is going to really determine how this plays out. And at least in my view, and I believe in OnTruck's view, is that we need to leverage this to the extent possible so we can actually go forwards and build this future of transportation. And the right people who can, of course, manage it, also secure the data, are in many ways tech companies, because they have the expertise to actually leverage the data in many useful ways and be able to share that to cities, to businesses, and to consumers as well.
Thank you. Let's do something to
I mean, I think we share, I think, an almost identical model to Move It. I mean, the best approach to not inadvertently be responsible for a security breach is to not have any information that it matters if it leaks. So obviously we have our commercial interests at stake, but the data that we take data from telecom operators, by the time we even get it, it's already been, all the personal information has been stripped and any identifiers have been randomized, so it's impossible for us to trace anyway. Even if that leaks, it's not valuable. Okay. And then we aggregate as well. And again, we've had the whole three-letter abbreviation agency approaches as well. And we just, not only do we sort of say a flat no to those, but we've walked away from a number of really good commercial opportunities just because we can't risk. Like, our business is based on trust with operators, ultimately with the public carrying phones around, and with the clients, and we can't breach any of those three, otherwise we're done.
So thank you very much, guys, coming for London, Indonesia, Israel. I can't offer you a car sharing to go to Israel, London, or Indonesia, but I can offer you a car sharing to go to the airport, maybe the window to choose whatever you want. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.